Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And Elmo from Sesame Street. He has an X account and it was hacked.
And he started posting funny things. Let's just put it that way.
And we're going to take an older Jordan Peterson clip as a context to talk about the education system and where it was and kind of where it's going.
Yeah, because Jordan Peterson lately has been a little bit off base, but I mean, at least his opinions on the education system and ideological stuff is still kind of good.
More than kind of good. He actually used to do a deep dive with all the people that were on the cutting edge of trying new education systems. So that's when he was really, I was watching him a lot, and I really liked a lot of the guests he had on there. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go into the first story here, and maybe we'll start with the Jordan Peterson story.
Yeah, so from Wide Awake Media, Jordan Peterson, the American education system was based on the Prussian model, and they talk about this all the time. And the Prussians produced the universal education system in the late 1800s because they wanted to produce a cadre of mindless, obedient soldiers. That was expressly the purpose. And then the model was adopted in the US by corporate types mostly who wanted to produce cadres of obedient workers. And that's why the desks are in rows, that's why there's a factory bells, that's why it's top-down leadership. People who built the schools were consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students because they wanted them to be obedient.
And this is a bit of an older clip, but I think it still has great context. And if you haven't seen this interview, I do highly recommend it. Mm-hmm.
I did some investigation into the derivation of the North American, European, for that matter, public education system and found out that it was based on the Prussian model. And the Prussians produced a universal education system in the late 1800s because they were afraid they were losing military superiority, and they wanted to produce a cadre of mindless, obedient soldiers.
And pause it for a moment.
That was it.
And we're either going to stick to that model because they want mindless, obedient citizens, or we're going to realize AI is coming and is really going to do a lot of that mindless work. So maybe we need to figure out a new education model here. And Jordan Peterson, for quite a while, was bringing academics that were creating new institutions and new ways of learning. And it was very interesting, some of the things that are being tried right now, especially in Florida. Mm-hmm.
Expressly the purpose. And then that model was adopted by prototypical fascists in the US, again in the late 1800s. This is before Mussolini and all of that time. Corporate types mostly who wanted to produce cadres of obedient workers. And that's why the desks are in rows, and that's why there's factory bells, and that's why it's top-down leadership. But what was really stunning about that wasn't only that that was the model, but it's worse than that, because the people who built the schools were consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students who were part of the system because they wanted them to be obedient. Now,
and also how you would build a factory worker is the same way you would need to build a soldier. So you need obedience, you need mindless focus, you need to really cut down on creativity and open thought and things like that.
And critical thinking, which is what we see now as a result, and also how easy it is for the system to be hijacked by things like artificial intelligence and by students not really caring about their learning, not really being invested or even interested in learning. And I say this from personal experience because I used to hate school, but I love learning things. And when it's self-directed and when I'm able to research it by myself, I love it. But when I used to have to sit and read a specific thing about a specific topic, where and when the people told me to, the teachers, etc., I was terrible at it. So I wasn't a good student, but I'm a good student outside of the system. But I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, and I believe this gentleman that he was interviewing here had a school, and it was interesting because all the grades were kind of integrated. And as you got older in the school, you would take on a leadership role, group cooperation and stuff, but you would teach the kids at a young age to also take on leadership roles of people that are older than them or more experienced. So it was a very interesting model of learning, and it was primarily based around self-learning. So they would have a task, and then everybody in the group would have to work together to solve that task.
And not only that, but the current system also allows for a lot of the capture we've seen, the capture of the institutions, be it schools and teachers' unions and all of that mess, or universities themselves, because it continues to be kind of that same system, but for more adult types. But they still get captured, and it still shows that there's no actual critical thinking if it's so easy to capture and take away.
Well, At first, they were really doing creating manufacturing workers, creating soldiers with these routines and things like this. But at a certain point, they already have that drilled in. So they turned these institutions into ideological training grounds for their students, and they went a step further. And that's really when these places became really dangerous.
And that's also why I will always continue to advocate, be it homeschooling or pod schooling or finding a school where it's not done in the traditional way. And I continue to hammer on as well, always, about how the education system, this specific Prussian model type of education system, fails boys in particular, at least right now, because number one, there's only about 20% of teachers or less that are male in all of the education system in the US, but also it forces little boys who are most likely to learn by doing and playing and falling and doing a mess to sit down and stay still and draw and paint and talk like the females are more likely to learn. But the fact that they're both in the same space and they have to be controlled by a teacher and the teacher has to keep the attention of them doesn't work for little boys, and they end up taking a bunch of different stuff to help them sit still.
I have a little bit of a different view. My view of education is the best education is an Amish education. I think a farm and construction can teach you everything you need in life, whether it's how to do math through construction. If you have to learn how to build a home from square one, and maybe it's over a multi-year process, you teach a child how to actually build a home, how to do the plumbing, how to do the electricity. This is math, this is science. All those basic STEM things are kind of in
What
there.
about reading and writing?
Or they can be incorporated in there. And then with farm work, a lot of that stuff is incorporated as well. So, and then you would have to eventually, hopefully you would put marketing in there and things like that. So you would market the stuff from the farm as a project.
So that's how teaching kind of used to be as well. But I mean, you do need reading and literacy rates and etc. But right now they're horrible in the US. They're doing terribly in the PISA, which I forget what it stands for, but the PISA exams or the PISA examinations. And just in every metric, the US is not doing so well in education, and a lot of other countries are not doing well. But with your Amish model, that's what I'm saying. Like homeschooling is essentially in a way, or if you can do it similar to that, is more beneficial to
and you learn a lot
life.
more, and you learn a lot more than just the math you're going to learn by constructing a house or learning how to construct a house or doing the electrical on there or how you're going to grow food. You're going to learn a lot of through gardening you would learn certain types of sciences as well. But naturally on a farm, there's going to be plenty of animals, and you're going to learn about life and death, babies being born, whether it's pigs or cows or whatever, and farm animals dying. So it really incorporates everything. If you really think on it in an integrated model, other than maybe reading and writing, but you just add that in, and then you add that into the marketing of the food as a school project.
And it's funny because I forget I think it was Jubilee or one of those where they lined up a bunch of people where they had to sort themselves by who had the highest IQ. And there's this girl that's like, oh, I'm doing my PhD and blah, blah, blah. And I studied at this university and that university. And I obviously have the highest IQ. And then there was, I think, a farmhand or a kid that was a farmer but was also in the military, something like that. And he said, I'm average intelligence. And when they actually revealed the scores, he was the highest intelligence and she was at the lower end. And it just goes to prove how the traditional education and what we think of as, the experts or the educated people are not always as educated, or at least not in everything, as they like to believe themselves.
And a lot of really educated people lack basic common sense. And this is what the academic field fails to teach you. That's why it's really important. Even when people are going into college, I always like people that would work in the field first, and then figure out the path to a promotion, and then go to school specifically for that, and then go back into the field after they took a small break. Mm-hmm. So.
And Rogue Thinker says, it is perhaps a good piece of learning, but it isn't everything you need to know, which is kind of what I say, which is why I think homeschooling kind of gives you a better formation overall, but it also lets you see where the individual child is going instead of being in a room with 30 other kids that are also going insane because it's incredibly boring and they're not actually learning much. They're just following processes and procedures that don't lead anywhere other than to a factory.
Yeah, most people that I know that were homeschooled were much better educated. Overall, they would lack some social development, though, I did notice.
you can, I mean, solve for that. I mean, they can
Yeah.
still go to after school activities. They can still be involved in a lot of different activities as well and around children. There's this myth also that little kids, like little babies, need to start interacting like almost at 6 months. And it's a myth because up until I think age 4 or 5, they don't actually have the developmental skills to fully relate to another child. So they don't need that much interaction with kids. That's when the formation with the mother and the family and the close-knit family is the most important. I could go on forever, but Follow the Bradley's fun. Ron says, thank you all for earlier. Thank you for having us. It was great.
It was great.
Hope to repeat it soon.
Yeah, I'm much more nervous when we do guest appearances on other people's show. I don't know when it's appropriate to talk, when it's not. I'm much more comfortable here. Because there's a bit of a delay when you're, if you've ever been a guest on somebody's show on YouTube or something, there's a little bit of a delay, so you're constantly kind of talking over people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I tried to avoid. But yes, it was great. Thank you so much.
If anybody hasn't seen it, we talked the new Disney animatronic of Walt, and it looked absolutely...
And the disrespect.
Yeah, it looked absolutely horrible. What they're doing to his memory and just the memory of Disneyland by taking
His
out
legacy.
a lot of the historical rides and things like that as well. It's just crazy.
There's a balance between, progress, because Walt did want things to move forward, and he always said that Disney will always be evolving and will never be done, will never be completed. But at the same time, if you're only focusing on bringing in IPs that little kids will know and the parents will kind of shell out for, but has no substance, has no creativity or culture, then it's
but
not
if you're going to make a bad animatronic of Walt Disney, the creator of the park, it's like maybe pass on that and do a hologram because you have enough video footage of him and Mickey Mouse at the front of the park welcoming guests. Mm-hmm. That would be, and you would be able to get it perfect because you have so much video footage of Walt. You could easily make an animatronic. Anyway, this wasn't part of this.
You get working on that. Rafa says, hello, guy.
Oh, good to see you. Well, I don't need to work on it because Tupac had a hologram for his on-stage presence, so they can just use the same technology there.
I think it's best to preserve Walt's memory by showing what he created and his ideas rather than like him as a being, as an entity. I think like speaking for the creativity and the magic and everything he created and the legacy he's left behind, that's what's important.
Yeah, that's important as well. But I want to see a hologram. So.
Okay, fine. Go tell Disney.
Okay, let's go into Elmo now, though. Not quite Disney, but...
Yeah, it's not. Sesame Workshop regains control of Elmo's hacked X account after bad posts. I'll just say.
And I reviewed this a little bit on my pop culture show in the morning time, but we'll go a little bit more in depth now because this is a political show, so we can.
Yes. So Sesame Workshop regained control of its Elmo account on the X platform Monday after a hacker gained access and posted a string of racist and anti-Semitic messages. I don't know if YouTube lets me say those words. That's why I'm trying to mute them. Elmo's X account was compromised by an unknown hacker who posted disgusting messages, including these horrible posts. Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit behind Sesame Street, and Elmo said in a statement on Monday the account was compromised over the weekend, and instead of the usual posts of encouragement and kindness, Elmo's 650,000
well, yeah, this is
followers.
interesting. This is kind of interesting because it's the perfect account to hack if you want to get news headlines. Elmo saying anti-Semitic things and stuff of this nature is going to grab headlines. So, and they've been having a lot of trouble on X lately. The CEO recently quit over similar things that happened with the X algorithm.
With Grok and AI. Because Grok, which is artificial intelligence from X, before Twitter, one user told him to start behaving like the man with the mustache, and apparently it kind of infected all of Grok.
Yeah.
So everything that Grok was putting out was as if he was, the man with the mustache, and he was talking to all his followers.
Well, and this is a problem with AI in general, whether AI is changing itself through user information and user questions, or it's being programmed by software developers themselves, like ChatGPT was when it was corrupted. When it first went up, it was making historical figures a different race because it was wanting to be biased and it be much more inclusive. That resulted in a lot of false information and things like that. Something similar is happening to Grok now, but in a different way, because I don't think this was necessarily the programmers. I think it's integrating the information it's getting from users.
Because Grok is mostly built upon like everything that's on X and all the information that's there. That's how they train the thing and the internet. But I mean, there is a lot of that there.
Well, Musk was talking the other day about this thing. Grok 4 is so smart, it's starting to be able to educate and teach itself new concepts and ideas. So it doesn't necessarily need the same kind of training methods as before. But if that's the case, what happens if it is taking user conversations, educating itself on that, and then getting false information?
Yes.
So,
Which is why I don't think we should ever trust AI. And I'm against AI. I don't like it. But I mean, it's a reality that we're going to all have to contend with. But my main number one question with the whole Elmo thing is why on earth does Elmo have an X account?
well, yeah, we all know.
Like Elmo's supposed to be like a little kid,
No.
like have the mentality of a little kid.
I answered this question this morning
I
on the
know.
Pop Culture Show. This is Sesame Street in recent years has been progressive propaganda onto children, just like elementary schools and things like this.
Yes. But my main thing is if it's for kids, X is chock full of corn and things that little kids shouldn't see. And then if it's for the adults, then why are adults taking mental health like cues from a puppet?
What? Well, I don't understand.
So the Elmo account became very famous for here. Elmo's social media account has lately become a place for mental health awareness. Last year, the red fuzzy monster, eternally 3.5, so he's 3.5. What 3.5 as an X account? Caused a sensation when he asked, Elmo is just checking in, how's everybody doing? It prompted responses from then President Joe Biden and Chance the Rapper.
Yeah, but a lot of kids are on social media at a very young
shouldn't be.
age. Not that I don't agree with it, but this is the kind of things. If parents that do allow their kids on social media at a young age, I don't think it's a good idea. But if they do, this is the kind of accounts they would sign them up for when they're supervising them, if they're getting supervised.
But again, like if it's for marketing, I don't think it's a good marketing strategy. If it's for the adults, then that's weird. If it's for kids, that's even more weird.
I think it's a good marketing strategy because it allows it to be a little bit more interactive and stuff like that. So,
But again, what they're interacting with kids. Kids should not be on X.
yeah, I'm aware of that. There's a lot of issues with this thing, but people have, like, you used to have a page for our dog on Instagram.
For like 2 seconds, only because she has a very like specific and scary spinal injury, and I kind of wanted to see who else had it and try kind of give information out about it. But then I just forgot about it. I can't even log back in. But I mean,
She's still alive, so we'll be okay.
yes, she's still alive. We had that American education system story. There's another story. Do you want me to go into that?
Let's go into it.
So from the AP as well, how Trump plans to dismantle the education department after Supreme Court ruling. And this is recent.
And yeah, the education department needs to be dismantled if it needs to, in order to rebuild it. Especially right now, we're at this critical stage where we were just talking with the Jordan Peterson article. It needs to be rebuilt. The way these kids are educated, it needs to be a new model. What that model is, we're not sure yet, but we need to get this ideology at least damped down to a minimum. I don't think we're going to be able to ever get rid of it, especially in the U.S. or Western education system. It's so infected, but making major cuts will at least tone it down to a minimum, and then they can figure this thing out.
So Education Secretary Linda McMahon, who I don't think is the best, but is
And she's from the she's the guy
she's
that
the wife of the WWE
Vince
guy.
McMahon.
That guy. Is expected to move quickly now that the Supreme Court has cleared the way for the Trump administration to continue unwinding her department. The justices on Monday paused the lower court order that had halted nearly 1,400 layoffs and had called into question the legality of President Donald Trump's plan to outsource the department's operations to other agencies. Now, Trump and McMahon are free to execute the layoffs and break up the department's work among other federal agencies. Trump had campaigned on closing the department, and McMahon has said the department has one final mission to turn over its power to the states.
Yeah, and what I would like to see, if we're talking in regards to the United States specifically, the United States is in a good place here because they have over 50 states, so they can try new education models, really see what kind of works, what doesn't work, and take the best ideas and maybe combine them, rather than what we've seen during the Jibby Jab era, where they had one plan for the whole globe. And if that thing goes wrong, the whole globe goes wrong. With education here, you really have the strength of the United States really being able to try different models based upon their state and their state funding and things like this.
Yes. And giving the power back to the parents.
Yeah.
Instead of having them hand over their child for 8 hours a day to, an ideological, institution that just churns out.
Well, and
clones.
they were talking about school vouchers, not just for parents to use at the schools, but also for extracurricular activities and stuff like that. For taking them to museums, it will count towards credits. So it's a way for people that are doing homeschooling to potentially open up that market more broadly to pods of schooling and things like that.
And in other news, while the left is melting down about the education department, the right is melting down over Pam Bondi, and the Epstein files.
Yeah, I've kind of came to my approach, which I think they're setting up a trap, but whether they are or not, I don't need to keep repeating myself. What I am going to say is I'm taking a wait and see approach. This is a critical subject matter for me. So if he doesn't release the files, or he hides them, or he covers them up, I am going to be very angry. But if he is setting up a trap, he needs time to set up that trap. So either which way, it did come out today. Ghislaine Maxwell is ready to testify. Is she being cut a deal so she'll give the right names because they don't have any files anymore? This whole thing is just something fishy's going on here. It's just very hard to figure out exactly what's going on. Is he setting a trap? Is he actually trying to cover it up? Are donors and investors or foreign governments really putting pressure on the administration? Do they have blackmail in the family? There's just too many pieces now. And rather than keep speculating, my thing is, I'm going to give them at least a month and a half to see what kind of happens.
But now, in further stirring the pot with MAGA, U.S. President Donald Trump has defended Pam Bondi, who is in the crosshairs of a lot of people.
Hold on. As much as I said I'm going to wait and see, Pam Bondi has burned most of her bridges at this point. She is the weak link. So if they are going to get rid of somebody and this isn't a trap, Pam Bondi does need to be gone at this point, or she needs to come out real quick with this trap. I was supporting her in the beginning and I didn't know who she was. And now that she's kind of revealed herself time and time again, saying, I have all the files on my desk, I have thousands of videos. You had none of that, or at least that's what it's looking like now. You're directly lying to the public, and this isn't the first time now.
Amid calls from the president's supporters for her to resign. In a lengthy social media post, Trump hit out at complaints from critics who have accused Attorney General Bondi of withholding more information about the passing away of disgusting person Jeffrey Epstein and his so-called client list. The attacks from critics came after a memo released by Bondi's Justice Department saying that they didn't have anything. Let Pam Bondi do her job, Trump wrote in all caps, encouraging his supporters to not waste time and energy on Epstein.
And I will remind everybody of the Iran situation. And so it didn't turn into a forever war, or at least not yet. So maybe give him some room to breathe, but this isn't going to die down. I'm willing to say, I'll give him a month and a half and then we'll see what happens if he sets a trap or not. But this is going to be brought up not by only me, but social media right now is not even given any time to breathe. They're all over this every day. This is mounting. This is becoming a major issue for the administration.
Well, it has been since almost it started.
Yeah. So I pray to God he's setting a trap, because the midterms are coming up and this will absolutely destroy him in the midterms. The Democrats are motivated to come out right now for a lot of reasons, for the reason of abortion, for reason of what's going on in the Supreme Court, immigration. They're motivated to go to the polls. What happens on the midterms with Republicans, they typically don't go to the polls because Trump is not on the ballot. When Trump is on the ballot, that's when Republicans were far more likely statistically to go to the polls. So everybody down ballot from Trump typically just wins because Trump is at the top. That being said, he needs to get this situation corrected before the midterms, and he's going to also need to do a few other things in order to garner goodwill of the voters and really motivate them to come out.
And speaking of, you just said abortion, we have let me just read Rafa's first, and then I'll go to the story. Rafa says, have you seen Candace Owens' take on Trump and the Epstein list?
Yeah, I was watching it today. So what do you think?
I haven't, so I don't know.
Yeah, so I think she's going to continue to apply pressure like a lot of other people. And like, I didn't like Charlie Kirk's take, but it's kind of like mine. He said he's not going to bring it back up. I'm saying I am going to bring it back up, but it's going to be in a month. I want to see what he does here. A lot of people are really backing off of the administration. So I don't know. Social media, when you log into YouTube right now, that's all it is. Epstein, 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 and it's from all the right. The left isn't really biting on it quite yet. I mean, they're talking about it, but the right is furious. Every video is about this. Mm-hmm. So.
Yes, but because you mentioned abortion, and we did talk about this story about birthright citizenship and the fight that might actually end abortion if unborn babies are qualified as persons that deserve citizenship. New Hampshire judge blocks Trump attempt to end birthright citizenship, grants class action status. So now unborn babies are a class in itself, or a class of people, which means...
Oh, they went forward on the lawsuit.
Yes.
We were talking about this the other day.
That's why I wanted
and
to
my
bring it
big
up.
theory was, and this came out from, what lawyer was I watching? There was the one lawyer that said the Democrats were pushing this law through so quickly as an action because they're reacting to what Trump's doing. They're going to lose the right for an abortion in the United States based upon this. This is a complete opening if this lawsuit went forward, which it looks like it now is. The conservatives or the traditionalists may just concede the whole case because that now opens up rights for unborn babies. And if an unborn baby has a right to citizenship, then they have the right to life because now they have personhood. So that's going to completely change the context of the law itself.
So now they become a class of people that can be affected by X or Y decision granted by a court or not granted by a court. So now a federal district judge court in New Hampshire issued an injunction against President Donald Trump's executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship and held that a group of non-citizens suing the government have class action standing to sue. This is a giant mistake by the ACLU, who usually fight for abortion. Maybe they didn't think about it. Maybe they thought this was more important, which is weird because abortion is their number one issue. So
yeah, and by mistake, I mean it's a mistake on their part. I'm happy to have abortion be illegal personally, but
or restricted at least.
They now under this, if unborn babies now get personhood and get any kind of right, they're going to also be able to use that as a precedent and say they have the right to life. So you may lose the ability to have an abortion, and then you're also going to lose birthright citizenship if they lose the case itself. Mm-hmm. So you've not only set the precedent, but you set the precedent and you're not guaranteeing the victory on the case.
So Judge Joseph LaPlante's decision will stop the executive order from taking effect July 27 in New Hampshire and other states that don't currently have injunctions, but the decision has been stayed until July 17 to allow the government to appeal, he announced.
I just wouldn't appeal it. I would let the case go forward at this point, and then you want to take it to trial so this precedent has been set into law and this argument has been made. Mm-hmm. I would maybe even concede the case because you're going to lose birthright citizenship, but now you have a wide open door to make abortion illegal, and you have more than a foothold.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is more than the door just opening a little bit. It's kind of blowing.
And a lot of people don't know about this take. There's only a couple of legal scholars really talking specifically about this case and how it could outlaw abortion within the United States. And a lot of people didn't think this case was actually going to go forward, so they weren't talking about it. I think this is going to become a huge talking point as this case goes forward.
I'm trying to look for where they specifically are granting a class. Regarding...
That's all right. Let's go into the next story here. We have quite a few stories today.
Because this one I remembered once you said abortion that this decision had kind of started to come out, so I wanted to just talk about it, but we'll continue to talk about it.
Okay, let's move
on. We talked about Bondi. Oh, tariffs. Fun. So Trump announces 30% tariffs against the EU, Mexico to begin August 1st, rattling major U.S. trading partners.
Yeah, so he's announcing a 30% tariff on the EU and Mexico, and he's trying to get these people into a deal. Well, if we remember Canada's playing the hardest ball of the EU, Mexico, and Canada. That being said, Canada's at 35% tariff, and I think they have a baseline tariff on top of that. So they're really hurting right now. Mexico itself, I think, is in the best position. Trump generally likes Mexico as a trading partner economically. He doesn't like all the corruption that's here in the government, but I think Mexico is well set, and they're not quite as interlinked with the EU and Canada. Canada and the EU right now are absolutely interlinked. They're talking about how their economies are a global economy, how they rely on each other, how they're going to constantly work together, how they're approaching the United States as a team. The United States or Mexico is kind of a little bit left out on that, which is a good thing. This may open up a lane for negotiations for the Mexicans for a good tariff deal. Because he's going to want to make if Canada and the EU are absolutely stuck on each other and they want the same deal and they're not willing to negotiate, Trump needs to buy time. The best way to buy time is to make a deal with Mexico, because that way he can get a lot of the raw minerals, raw resources that Canada usually provides, like copper, which they need right now, from Mexico until they can actually cut a deal. If he can put six to 12 more months of pressure on Canada, that economy is absolutely going to crumble, and then it's his for the taking. He'll basically set the terms of the deal.
So President Donald Trump on Saturday announced he's levying tariffs of 30% against the European Union and Mexico starting August 1st, a move that could cause massive upheaval between the United States and two of its biggest trade partners. Trump detailed the planned tariffs in letters posted to his social media account. They are part of an announcement blitz by Trump of new tariffs aimed at allies and foes alike, a bedrock of his 2024 campaign that he said would set a foundation for reviving U.S. economy that he claims has been ripped off by other nations for decades. In his letter to Mexico's leader, President Claudia Sheinbaum, Trump acknowledged that the country has been helpful in stemming the flow of undocumented migrants and bad substances into the United States, but he said the country has not done enough to stop North America from turning into a narco.
And he doesn't say that about Canada. He has exactly the opposite when it comes to Canada. Things are kind of setting up well for Mexico here, and this 30% tariff that's coming on, this is a generalized tariff going on a lot of countries. So he's not exactly specifically saying Mexico bad. This is just a general tariff, which he's trying to renegotiate. As far as I see Canada is in a horrible spot. And today it really came out, Mark Carney's investments. He has no investments in Canada, or very, very little. They're all in the United States. It benefits him to have the Canadian economy crumble so Trump can swoop in and make an amazing deal for the U.S. that will benefit Mark Carney's investments dramatically.
And he said, Mexico has been helping me secure the border, but what Mexico has done is not enough, he added. And I spoke about this quickly on Friday on my Spanish show about how Mexico is not really in a place to fully negotiate because there's more and more stuff coming out procured by the U.S., be it Ovidio Guzman, who is El Chapo's son, now kind of starting to talk in court, and his lawyer giving some very interesting statements about Mexico and the relationship between the bad people and the government, which is very well known here, but he's coming out openly and saying it now that they've captured more people like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. as well, who also has ties and links, and now that they're denying visas for a lot of Mexican government people in the Mexican government because of these same ties. Morena, especially, which is Claudia Sheinbaum's political party, but also all the other parties, are now in the crosshairs of a massive investigation that could, as we keep talking about, line up the dominoes for some sort of more U.S. involvement in Mexico. And that's the last thing that, and we say it, that we want or that Mexico would want, but at least there's way more leverage on the U.S.'s part with Mexico as well because of that and all the investigations that they've been doing.
Yeah, that being said, I think Mexico would have already had a deal. There's one thing Trump wants. Mexico and the United States have typically come to deals fairly quickly. And there was one thing that was always kind of out of the equation, and that was letting the U.S. military in through the Mexican military to work in cooperation to go after organized crime. And he's trying to put enough pressure. That's the one thing that this entire deal hinges on. That's what he wants, because if they don't give it to him, he may bring the American military in without their assistance. He's kind of lining up those dominoes as well. But that is the one negotiation thing where I don't know how far they're willing to go. And that's the one thing Trump wants. If that wasn't an issue, Mexico would have already had a deal with the United States.
And it's also interesting because today, I believe, the melted candle that you see there, Claudia Sheinbaum, who's the president of Mexico, said she's going to sue for defamation Jeffrey Lichtman, who is the lawyer for Ovidio Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son. And interestingly, I found out today as well that Jeffrey Lichtman was actually the lawyer that was helping Project Veritas back when, what's his face? O'Keefe. James O'Keefe was still part of it with the Biden diary.
Yeah, well, what you have to realize is they have these members of these organized gangs in the United States now testifying and making deals. If the organizations they're connected with, the United States has already deemed a terrorist organization. And now if they testify that Claudia Sheinbaum or other people in the current Mexican government is part of their organization as well, the United States can now deem the government of Mexico one of those organizations.
Which would not be
And then that
ideal.
would give them the justification to come in the country without the Mexican government. That's how they're currently trying to pressure the Morena government to working with them to go against, but they're playing it from both sides here.
Yeah. Everybody's playing it from both sides. And Rafa says, if Mexican cartels are terrorist organizations, shouldn't Trump be worried that some of his own citizens are selling weapons to terrorist organizations?
Yeah.
And they don't just do it in Mexico, they do it all over the globe.
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that's going on, but I don't want to see the American military come into Mexico. But it's obvious that the dominoes are lining up, and that's what's holding up the trade deal. So, and threatening the government itself to deem it a terrorist organization is going to put a lot of leverage on the current government here in Mexico. So it's going to be very interesting what happens over the next, I would say, 24 months.
And Sheinbaum has to trade carefully, and a lot of the other Morena people that keep running their mouths have also have to trade carefully. But also,
wait, one more thing. Let's just say this. What they ultimately want to do is to have these organized gangs consolidate amongst each other, either through war or through cooperation. So there's only a couple left, and then they want to roll them up into the government, much like what happened to the KGB in Russia. So it's not necessary. So yeah, I'm sure all parties involved are trying to figure out either how to do that or how to do something.
Mm-hmm. And I was saying, speaking of tariffs and the Democrats on the left fully melting down over some good news, the Treasury posted unexpected surplus in June as tariff receipts surge. And the U.S. right now is in a massive deficit, I think one of the biggest ones they've ever been in.
Yeah, we went over this the other day, and it was well over $20 billion. He's brought in, I think it's 27 now. And this is a massive amount and this is only on a few countries right now. So he's not bringing it in anywhere near the tariffs he was expecting to. And it's already a massive amount of money. This is going to equal into the trillions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And this is...
But, I mean, as well, this is just kind of the first aftershock effects of it. Like, we don't know how the rest of the months will pan out, how the tariffs will affect, and how prices will continue to surge. So, I mean, if we're trying to control debt and the prices start surging, then this number might actually go down, not up.
No, it's not going to. It won't go down because he hasn't got any trade deals with anybody. So his tariffs aren't affecting a lot of countries and a lot of people. So this is the minimal amount. It would never be lower than this. It will only go up from here. This is actually a very, very small amount compared to the potential. He has the potential to bring in trillions of dollars with this.
But I mean, in the U.S., some prices of imported goods will go up, and that will reflect in the debt overall of the country. So I mean, right now, maybe those prices haven't been up enough for them to actually take effect within the debt bubble that the U.S.
doesn't go into the debt. The prices on the ground do not affect the debt.
No,
it just affects the consumer.
Yes, but consumer debt also goes into debt. So.
Yeah, but there's a lot of less loans and things going out. That's why interest prices are very high right now. So it's not going to really affect the economy the way I think you're trying to play it out.
But maybe. What I'm saying is maybe we won't continue to see this, at least in the next few months. But after it settles, we might.
This thing's going to be in the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars before it goes to trillions.
Okay, we'll see.
Because there's some nationalized goods such as steel, minerals, things like this that are going to continue to trade, and they're in the trillions of dollars. So that even a small tariff on those are going to make a big difference. Other countries already know this. Canada's already doing this. India does this. The UK does this. Most of the EU does this. Sometimes they don't call it a tariff; they call it a tax, but it works just like a tariff. Now that's getting done to them, they're extremely angry because they've arranged their entire economy to put their hand in the pocket of the U.S., and now that the U.S. is taking their hand out of their pocket, they're a little bit pissed.
And speaking of pissed and hands in pockets, the European Union to delay retaliatory tariffs on on U.S. goods in hope of reaching a deal. So now they want to talk.
Yeah. Why don't you read a little bit of it?
Sorry, you put this up there. The European Union will suspend retaliatory tariffs on goods from the United States that were scheduled to take effect on Monday. The EU hopes it can reach a trade deal with the Trump administration by the end of the month. This is now the time for negotiations. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, or the villain, told reporters in Brussels on Sunday. A day earlier, President Trump sent the letter announcing that 30% tariffs will start on August 1st.
That I was trying to remember why I put this article in after the last article, and that was because even when August 1st comes, I think there's going to be another reprieve, and he's going to delay it. So,
like it already happened.
Yeah. So, and the EU doesn't have a lot of leverage over the United States. Neither does Canada or Mexico. So he's going to keep the pressure on one of them, maybe Canada. Mm-hmm. The one he puts the pressure on is the one he's trying to break the most. So he wants different things from Canada than he does Mexico, and then he wants the EU. And with the EU, it's a little bit of a different situation because we've already seen a tariff deal come with the UK. Even though they had Brexit and they separated, he's going to probably try to separate off individual countries. He's coming to a deal specifically with Italy for an independent deal. That's going to be interesting because if individual countries start peeling off, what's the EU going to do as a whole? The EU has a lot of leverage with their international globalist banks in which they finance these countries and give them debt loans. So are they going to put their own interest in front of these debt loans that the EU is trying to holding over their heads?
And speaking of globalist organizations, from Gays Against Groomers, which is a great organization, it's essentially gay people trying to rescue themselves away from the TQ plus idiocy that has taken over their, well, now it's not even a community, but says throwback to 2022 when the World Economic Forum admitted they were behind the LGBTQIA2SP plus agenda. This woman was giddy at how many young people now identify as LGBTQ and says they will work hard to push it on society and children, and we gays, so Gays Against Groomers, are against this.
And I put this in so we don't forget, just like the Jibby Jab era, I very often put stuff in there to kind of remind us because this whole thing's changing now. The progressive movement is backing out of this whole trans thing, saying, oh, this was never a thing. It was just a very small percentage of liberals that supported this, but it was the power base of that party, and they're implementing these policies into schools, into hospitals, into gender clinics, into psychology itself. So this was very dangerous. And let us not forget, this is what it was just a couple of years ago.
Today, I'm really proud to sit on WEF's Power of Media Task Force, and GLAAD is a very proud partner of the Partnership for Global LGBTQI Equality, which is also known as PGLE. And PGLE was launched right here in 2019 and is a project of WEF and the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human.
And they almost never want to mention the UN, but the UN also has some really interesting documents regarding children and women in their whole...
Well, they're trying to change the definitions of a lot of these words, and they're doing it with individual countries first. So when they do it on a global scale, it's already been accepted and the precedent has already been set.
Rights. We work with the news, business, entertainment, faith leaders, sports, governments, and individual activists from around the globe to ensure and educate public people on LGBTQ issues.
And don't forget one of the main things she said is religious leaders.
And the way this money was being distributed was through USAID, at least the large majority of it. So as soon as you seen Trump cut that off, you're now seeing this whole thing crumble. And she's just so proud back in 2022 on how we're financing all of these things. And they'll never figure out how we're financing it. They not only figured it out, they cut it off in quick order, and how the cookie is now crumbling.
Move policy forward. In the U.S., the Gallup poll this year showed that over 20% of Gen Z are LGBT. We've been running studies ourselves that include the Q, and so it's LGBTQ, and we expand the age from 18 to 34, and you can see nearly 40% of Gen Zers identify as LGBT.
Pause it.
Today,
And you see, if we do this and we add this and we do this, well, no, 40% of kids are not. If you want to manipulate statistics and ask weird questions that people don't even understand what you're really asking them, yeah, you might be able to get to that 40% number, just like you can get to Canada has a great economy, which we all know it doesn't, and it's on the verge of collapse right now. And this is what these globalist organizations are doing. Oh, the EU's in great shape. Immigration is good. All this bullshit and all these bullshit statistics, they love to manipulate them so they can write their own narrative.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of writing their own narrative, you put this in there. I don't fully understand. But from Mark Nixon, who is a Canadian that talks about Canadian truths, the bombshell Auditor General Karen Hogan confirmed 100% of Liberal-era contracts she examined broke federal procurement law rules. Translation, competitive bidding ignored, paperwork missing, friends and insiders feasting on your tax dollars in Canada.
Yeah, so you need to have, the contracts have to go out, and there has to be a term for a fair bid, so everybody has the option to bid. And then usually the lowest bidder wins, or whoever's within that pool. Lowest bidder or near lowest bidder wins. This is how the U.S. military does their contracts as well. This is how the Canadian government was supposed to do their contract. They did not do that. They just assigned these multi-million-dollar, $100 million, even billion-dollar contracts directly to their friends, where they had direct ownership in these companies. This is a huge scandal, and it's not only happening in Canada. This is happening all over, especially in the EU as well.
And there's,
the Trump government can probably give out contracts as well, but there is a watchful eye on them. It's a lot harder for them to do things like this. So,
true. There they are. Enter Mark Carney. Canada's new prime minister needed an ethics screening for 103 companies, Brookfield, Stripe, etc., because of his past roles and holdings. He's legally barred from touching files involving those firms. And admission his private interests could collide with public duty.
Wait, let's pause it here. He's not allowed to. He's supposedly not allowed to know his own financial interests anymore, and he has billions of dollars. So, and he's directly hooked up with Brookfield Management, which is the largest asset management company within Canada. They run all the Social Security and stuff like that, all those investments. That being said, he's not allowed to know his own assets. But they have a fund manager, and it's going to be very interesting when they release the name of that fund manager, if he has any prior connections, because that fund manager and him could be working behind closed doors to kind of rig his financial earnings.
Same cast, same playbook. The majority of Liberal MPs who presided over the 100% contracting fiasco are still in cabinet or caucus. No systemic reforms, no procurement overhaul, no clawbacks of improperly awarded money, just fresh conflicts on top. Why should Canadians be uneasy?
Okay, I mainly brought it up for the first.
And
one.
there's a very localized example that I have from just Vancouver, where a low-income housing company that was building low-income housing called Tira, I believe, it was for women's shelters. All the contracts that they had been awarded and were then awarding to general contractors and stuff were all going to the husband of the lady who was in charge of the organization, the NGO.
Yeah, they need something to follow. We now have AI, so this is an opportunity to have total transparency of when these contracts are given out to companies. We want to see an exact line by line how they're spending the money, what other companies are receiving that money for the goods they're giving them, stuff like this. This does not just happen in Canada, but this is happening at a 100% rate in Canada, which is odd. So the level of corruption is off the chart. We already kind of knew that, but this also happens in Russia. Vladimir Putin recently is getting rid of a lot of oligarchs because they did the same thing. They said they were preparing certain regions of Russia in case there was a war. There's now a war. When those regions are breaking down, they're going over there finding there was 0 ditches dug, nothing was done, the money was pocketed, they said they did the work, and they're wondering why there's no defense in those regions. I just use Russia as an example because it's kind of opposite of Canada and the United States, but this goes on in every country around the world. We need a way to have built-in transparency so individual citizens can be watchdogs on the government rather than the government being watchdogs on the citizens.
That's a little wishful thinking, but yes.
I don't think it is. I think you set some basic laws on 100% transparency and you have AI dig into them.
But once power has power, they never let go of it.
Oh, well, of course.
Which is why I'm a conservative. And you had this as well. What is this?
Oh, yeah, let's read it and watch it.
Just watch it.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is unless you read it.
So from Defiant Els, you're telling me undocumented, unaccompanied kids can work at a MJ farm?
Oh, yeah, this was the farm in California where they had a raid on it, and then the people started assaulting the police officers and the individual citizens that were of different races and things like that. And when they did that, they didn't understand what's going on in this farm. There was 14-year-old kids working at a marijuana farm, and now they're complaining that they're going and doing an ICE raid there. I don't care if it's illegal migrants or whoever. 14-year-old kids should not be working at marijuana farms. Generally, whether you're legal or
kids,
that's illegal on
labor
top.
laws.
Well, there should be.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like there's child labor laws.
she's trying to defend this, and it's just crazy.
You're telling me undocumented?
I'm not saying the undocumented. I'm not talking about
work at a marijuana farm.
I'm not talking about the undocumented part, but according to this statement, in this country, not just at farm, not at marijuana
don't
farms,
give me
at all
semantics.
farms.
Look at the reality
No,
of what
I'm
we're
just saying.
talking about. How did?
And she's going to begin to say not just on marijuana farms, but all farms, kids are allowed to work. And I don't know if that is actually the case or the law. This is some bullshit liberal talking point. And if that is the case, it needs to be illegal.
Well, the thing is, they twist themselves into knots, also contradicting things that they themselves fought for with the child labor laws and
Well,
stuff like that.
I am for kids working on family farms and things like this, but industrial scale farms.
But there's also regulations on how many hours, like how the hours are counted, even the conditions of labor, etc. And with undocumented migrants, children doing that, I mean, the ones that hire them are able to do whatever they want because of the I can't talk today. But I was going to say I love Jillian Michaels as well because she kind of woke up, and now she has a very interesting podcast where she talks about her awakening to.
She's a lesbian fitness influencer, but she is very
from
good.
The Biggest Loser, yeah.
Yeah.
Listen,
an unaccompanied, undocumented 14-year-old
hey, Jillian,
in the middle of the day.
I believe that, and many people might believe, children should be subject to child labor laws.
Absolutely.
But it's true in this country that when it comes to agricultural work, they're not, and that includes marijuana farms. So the legality of their status is a separate issue, but the fact of children being there is not actually something that is necessarily illegal.
I have a really hard time.
And she said not necessarily illegal. Yeah. There's a lot of in between room there. This is a marijuana farm. These are typically shady industries, especially in California because it's so close to the border. People south of the border very often control a lot of these farms and things like this. Mm-hmm. So even just going in there to check if these were legal kids that were legally allowed to work there is something that they would give them the excuse to kind of go in there.
But also, why aren't they like school, which they keep also advocating for?
Oh, so there's that. So it's not unusual for there to be teenagers and working in a farm.
14-year-old can work at a marijuana growing.
It doesn't matter whether it's a marijuana farm or an apple farm.
A kid can't work at a bar.
It's agriculture. They're not smoking
If that's the
marijuana.
law, that's outrageous.
They're cultivating
and it should be changed.
The point is this incident, and we're still learning a lot more about it, was very dangerous and put a lot of people, including ICE officers and those immigrants, in danger.
Federal law enforcement agents.
I agree with you, but the tactics are producing chaos and violence, and I think that is one of the things that's caused people to.
It kind of came out on this. In the end, law enforcement shot tear gas to disperse everybody, which it did. As they were dispersing, they were assaulting people that were white in the crowd, but also they were getting violent against the ICE agents themselves before they fired the tear gas. So the only people really getting violent, other than the tear gas, were the protesters.
And that's the thing. Like, it's so dangerous, but who is the one creating this dangerous situation?
Yeah.
Who are the ones that are throwing things, protesting, and targeting specific people, including ICE agents?
And this was a very small group of protesters compared to when we seen LA. We had done the live stream when there was the LA protests and things like that, and the King's protest. That was much more violent. This was a very small group. So being it was a small group, the law enforcement had the physical advantage, and they really chose not to use it there. So
but the way, like, the people that support, be it the Democrats or illegal immigration, et cetera, twist themselves into knots by now saying that children should be working when that is one of the
marijuana farms.
Yeah, at marijuana farms. When that is one of the ethos of what it used to mean to be classically liberal and, like, acknowledging that childhood is a thing, et cetera.
She knew she lost the moral argument there. That's why she kept saying, well, based on the law. But anybody that's listening to that knows a 14-year-old kid working at a marijuana farm, even if you agree with marijuana, there's child labor laws and a lot of other things there that need to either change, or even if it is legal, it's not right. And the liberals like just trying to win the debate point, but she's losing the battle overall.
Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot. But speaking of immigration, from Newsweek, 5 states in talks for detention centers like Alligator Alcatraz, says Kristi Noem.
Yeah, and again, this is good to hear because you're going to have more self-deportations, meaning this just kind of sets the trend of, yes, we're building these facilities, we are starting to enforce the law, and what we're seeing is Trump has deported approximately 140,000 illegal migrants so far, and over 1 million have self-deported at airports and been given $1,000 and a ticket anywhere in the world, whether it's their home country or another country that will accept them under refugee status. So as people are seeing these headlines, it's causing people to kind of self-deport. Mm-hmm.
And then again, it also that would give them the opportunity to attempt to go back into the country the legal way.
Yeah.
As well. If they get deported by ICE, they don't get to try to come back. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem praised Florida's Alligator Alcatraz Detention Center during a Saturday press conference, noting that 5 other states are in ongoing conversations to develop similar facilities modeled after the site.
And I just want to be very clear here, and I said this the other day, there's hundreds of billions of dollars going into constructing this ICE force and the facilities and the border wall, and a lot of people are starting to fracture in the base of Trump, whether it was because of the Iran thing or whether it's now because of these Epstein files. And if that base fractures and the midterms don't go Trump's way, they're going to be able to freeze Trump up and any legislation he's trying to put through for the next 2 years. If that happens, it's going to be very hard for Trump or for a Republican to win the next election. And if the Democrats get in there and all these facilities and they already have pre-approved funding for hundreds of billions of dollars, I'm not very optimistic on how they might use these facilities. They're not just going to tear them down, but they're definitely not going to use them to deport illegals. They may use them either on... There's any number of things they can use them on, but the American citizens are one of them.
Mm-hmm. That's your theory.
Well, they declared MAGA supporters last time Joe Biden was in office a terrorist organization, which was crazy.
Yes.
Those are
And
American
Christians.
citizens that are your political opponents, and now you have
Domestic
and now you're going to have facilities to lock them up in. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's the direction they were headed last time.
Or another, big medical scandal that could happen.
Yeah.
Now they have a bunch
Exactly.
of beds where people can quarantine or be quarantined or be taken to be quarantined.
I didn't even think about that. That's probably a better conspiracy theory than I have. See, you're not the bad. I'm not the only conspiracy theorist.
But yes, again, always think ahead 2 steps of where what you're proposing is going to take or might lead if the other side wins or if somebody else wins or if somebody else gets into power, which I think a lot of people lack when they support certain things.
Yeah,
and they
and-
go all in for.
And
X, Y,
I
or
like
Z.
a lot of the stuff Trump is doing with ICE, but building permanent facilities like this can be used in different methods in the future if the other party gets in power. That's why I like to see non-permanent infrastructure kind of imposed on this. Or if you want to build a border wall is fine as well because you're not locking anybody up on that. Maybe it's keeping all the American citizens in if the country collapses.
Yeah, true. No, you can't get out either. Speaking of can't get out, from Tommy Robinson, the Brit who keeps fighting for truth and telling the truth. The Irish are being told their children will be placed.
Let's go. This clip actually shocked me.
Okay.
Maybe we should go over to RUMBLE.
Sure.
For the last 3 stories of the day. Sometimes they're a little bit too hot for YouTube, and we just like to get people used to going over to RUMBLE to watch us in case another jibby jab era comes out or war breaks out. We probably won't be able to talk about it on YouTube.
Yes. So we'll see you over there.
If you haven't liked and subscribed,
Yes,
please
please
do
do
so.
so.
We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're almost at 300.
Yes. Thank you. We'll see you there in 1 second.